if you think about what happened during the pandemic, that's where we realized how vulnerable is our supply chain. So I think all have now the task really to de-risk the supply chain and not being dependent on one geography alone. And that's why I think India can play a key role in de-risking global supply chains, de-risking other geographies. It's another option as well, part of the global supply chain.
Welcome to the Smart Biotech Scientist. I'm your host, David Brühlmann, and buckle up. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on what might be your next strategic manufacturing advantage. As Western companies seek new strategic advantages, one question keeps surfacing. Is India truly becoming the new biotech manufacturing powerhouse? And what hidden capabilities are emerging that leading companies are racing to access? Joining us to reveal the inside story is Abdelaziz Toumi, who is the CEO of Lupin Manufacturing Solutions and veteran of global pharma giants like Bayer, Merck, and Lonza. With over 20 years in biotech, Abdelaziz brings unique insights on when and why you might want to look beyond traditional Western manufacturing partners. Ready to discover if Indian CDMOs could be the missing piece in your development strategy? Let's jump right in. Are you juggling the complexities of CMC development while trying to enjoy the beauty of biotech? Have you ever wondered if there's a way to simplify bioprocessing? Welcome to the Smart Biotech Scientist Podcast, where we're diving headfirst into the very challenges you face. We're breaking it down, demystifying the jargon, and giving you the keys to unlock your full potential. I'm your host, David Brühlmann, and I get it. With 15 plus years in the biotech industry, I face the same challenges you do. There's a way to simplify and streamline so you can remove complexity, you can skip trials and errors, deliver without delay your groundbreaking therapy to clinics and market, and still enjoy every single step. Do you want to learn how industry experts and I did it? Grab a cup of coffee and your favorite notebook and pen. Now is the time to take your bioprocessing game to the next level. Let's smarten up biotech. Welcome, Abdel, to the Smart Biotech Scientist.
Hi, David.
It's a pleasure having you on today.
The pleasure is mine, David. Thank you so much.
Abdel, share something that you believe about bioprocess development that most people disagree with.
David, this is a really tricky question. It took me some time to think about it. And there's something I could share is the estimation of future demand for a molecule entering the clinic. I feel since now 2 decades working in the pharma industry, I was always surprised by the forecast given whatever product you're looking for. But if you take as a service provider, you need to look at forecasts for an entire modality, be it small molecules, cell and gene therapy, etc. And within each segment, we've got sub-segments. And I believe we are overestimating the demand. And I'm realizing more and more the reason for that is probably lies in the fact that this modality do compete with each other. Think about, for example, the oncology field, right? There you have small molecule, you have ADCs, even a combination of biologics and toxic and chemicals. You've got cell and gene therapy. And I do believe when we look as a service provider in the industry and we look in each modality individually. And so we tend to overestimate that bit, right? Because they compete with each other and some modality might take over. Think about, for example, when we were fighting COVID, all of a sudden the mRNA technologies took over from the classical vaccines. And then if you are in the business of projecting future demand, developing lab capacity, manufacturing capacity, that's tricky. And that's something really I'm more and more conscious about. This is for me a big surprise. I'm not sure if people will disagree. Probably the majority of the people might agree with that, but this is something I thought I should be sharing in this podcast.
Yeah, I would love to know what you think, biotech scientists, because this is a well-debated topic. And I'm really excited to dive deeper into the discussion and to look into how you look at these things as a service provider. Before we dive into the CDMO landscape, I'm curious about your personal journey, Abdel. From lab bench at the university now to boardroom, what are some unexpected twists and aha moments that shaped your path?
I think one major aha moment for me personally, when I was a young process engineer with a big German company, and I started my career there as operational excellence manager, looking after fixing quality problems or improving processing time and all of that. I was, as a young scientist, put in a big project. I became just a Six Sigma black belt. And that was a challenging problem that the team was working on for years, where it's a basic chemical actually used in many processes and products. And there is a color issue. And this came and go, and it looks like random. And nobody could get to the root cause of it. And in the way they said, okay, there's a young and hungry engineer. And I made a proposal to the team. I said, look, I learned a lot of things about statistical process control and a structured way of thinking about a problem and using data to solve a problem. I mean, I'm talking about 20 years ago, where big data and all this artificial intelligence models would not exist back in the days. And okay, they said, let's give him a chance. And then we started actually for a project of 6-7 months, really analyzing data, collecting data in the first place, and then doing structured interviews with the knowledge people, with the shift managers, with the operation and developing different theories and developing different hypotheses and validating them. And you know what? At the end of the day, we could not find really chemically the root cause, what impurity led to whatever. But what we found out is if you are within a certain operating window, and this is statistically, if you keep certain parameters in control, you will not get into the trouble. So we found actually through data, operating parameters, if you keep controlling them, and you can, then you will not have a quality issue. And we implemented it. It was a big success. And that experience sticks with me since then, the power of data. So it's actually since then, whatever decision we take as a team or as an organization, it's got to be backed by data. So this is really a moment for me. When you come from as a scientist, you join the industry and you realize at the end of the day, the power of data and the value of data. That's really the biggest aha moment. The beginning of my career, which led the foundation for everything I do, even in commercial function. So I'm keen to look into data, comparing sales performance, try to understand geography, nuances, really driving by data because that's what matters. Input, output, and how can you improve it every day? And that seems to be basically really the secret of running also an organization. At the end of the day, of course, you have a soul, a culture, and all that will play a role. It's not only data. But that's a North Star. It gives you orientation, and people will not just guess. They will take decision based on data, based on analysis.
And how did this experience now shape the path to becoming a CEO of a big company?
Yeah. I mean, look, whatever we do internally, then people hear from me question, how do you back up this story? Often my people will not come in if they're not prepared, if they don't have the proper analysis, because I will be asking those questions. Be it financials, be it operational, be it commercial, be it strategic. We need to get our act together, understand what we're talking about, have a clear problem statement and back it up with data, be it quality, right? How you improve your processes every day. And this drives actually the strategy big time. It drives our operation, our operational excellence. This drives our digital journey. So why are we doing digitalization? Because this will give us access to data, and on the data we can act. And then if you automate it, then you can also reduce costs, maintenance, turnaround, and all of that. So basically, this is what's helping us as a leadership, whatever we venture into, not just gut feeling, or you need to back it with data.
So last year, you made a courageous leap. You decided to move to India and take over this role as a CEO. And I really was looking forward to this conversation because India is emerging as a biotech powerhouse. And I would love to hear your take on that. Now, being inside of India, what unique capabilities are setting India apart on the global stage?
India, as you know, is really emerging as a powerhouse for biotech. It's already established since a while for small molecule. And it's only natural that this country is going to develop into biotech. I mean, today, India ranked among the top 12 biotech destinations, attracting a lot of investment, a lot of attention. And in Asia, it's number 3 with China and Japan. And the Indian biotech market is experiencing significant growth because people in India, as everywhere in the world, are getting wealthier. If you come to visit India, big cities like Mumbai, Bangalore, Delhi is just big metropoles where you get everything. The infrastructure is there, talent is there, and you've got, most importantly, very hungry people. Hungry people for a better life for their kids and for their communities. So you can feel that hunger. For me, India is really following soon China. It's in the next, I would say, 5 to 10 years, probably will catch up with China, which is a very great example if you think back China 10 years ago. And I think India is on that path. And it's already a global leader. It's only 60% of the supply, global supply, is coming from India if you combine everything together. It's already today a key leader. It's very networked globally. It's a very liberal, very democratic country. I think the skills are outstanding. The fact that Indian, in average, speak extremely well English is their first or second language. That opens door for global business. And the Indian government is really investing heavily into biotech, providing funding, investing into infrastructure and policy, and working closely together with major leaders here in the world. I mean, there are agreements in the making between India and the US, India and Europe. It's like a country which is well connected to every region in the world. Not far away. I mean, it takes me 7 hours to get to Mumbai. Time zone is just 3.5 hours to Europe. So you can really do very well business with India. And there are a lot of biotech park in the development. And it's cost effective. Let's face it. At the end of the day, everywhere our health system are under pressure, aging population. And we're getting better and better treatment. And that's what we want, to live a healthier life longer. And cost will play a big role to treat more patients. And I think still India is a very competitive place. It will remain. So that's why actually it's a unique destination. And when we got the opportunity to visit country, I was in and out, connected with the country already in my past jobs. But when I got the opportunity now to join Lupin and I visited the manufacturing site, I visited Mumbai, I was just blown away. I like the way the country, I like culture. It's very family driven.
I am with you on that because I spent a lot of time in Asia and I was in India 2 years ago. And I think for people living in the US or in Europe, I think we often underestimate the power of Asia or in India in particular. I think a lot of things are happening. So I'm really with you on that. But now there is one point I would like to focus on, Abdel, because you mentioned the cost pressure. And I think that's where India comes into play. Because now speaking of CDMOs, what are the key benefits? Obviously, you mentioned cost effectiveness. Are there other key benefits Indian CDMOs can bring to the table compared to CDMOs that are in developed countries in Europe or in the US?
I think the cost advantages are there, of course, by far not only. I mean, cost advantages, you can tell 70-80% less than compared to Western companies, which means actually you can do with the same budget 2-3 projects more, right? Or even 4. So that could play a significant role. But I think you need to trust your service providers. They need to have a deep expertise in what they do. And I truly believe India is already established and small molecule is the leader. And I think it's the pharmacy of the world in a way, with a lot of great technical expertise in chemistry, in biochemistry, in analytical. Now, that availability of talent is key. The number of universities in India, very great universities, growing every day. The Indian community is connected to the whole world. There are a lot of Indian expats. This is a rich kind of access to people originating from India that attracted also by Indian company and while living maybe abroad. And I have a couple of Indian colleagues joining my organization living in the US or living in Europe, and they have all the expertise, they have all the education in the Western world, but they are connected to India as well. But we've got a lot of great scientists who did their graduation, their PhD in the US or in Europe and came back home. So we have access to those talent. India is investing as well. And it's really important, David, that if you think about what happened during the pandemic, that's where we realized how vulnerable is our supply chain. So I think all have now the task really to de-risk the supply chain and not being dependent on one geography alone. And that's why I think India can play a key role in de-risking global supply chains, de-risking other geographies. It's another option as well, part of the global supply chain.
Well, we have definitely several advantages, as you just outlined it in India. Something that comes into the mind of many scientists when outsourcing is the IP concern, because we know, for instance, in China, sometimes this is a tricky thing to manage. How is the IP situation in India?
I mean, CDMO, you're rightly so, David. It's a business of trust. You need to entrust your partner. A is an interest of any CDMO. Otherwise, you will be out of business very quick if you don't protect the IP of your customer. And often, actually, you even create IP for your customer. So when we get a project right from our customer and we develop for them a new route of synthesis, as they're paying for that, the IP is theirs. Right? That's a value we create for our customer. And India itself has one of the most advanced patent ecosystems. The IPR regime is significantly aligned with global standards like WTO and WIPO, strict confidentiality agreement. We have secure facilities. And then we have practices that ensure cloud compliance with IP law. So actually, the IP in India is one of the strongest, and the court system, etc., is well established. So that's really key for that. And that's the way we ensure, basically, we conserve and get the trust of our customer. Because in this business, you will not survive very, very long if you don't protect the IP of your customer.
Yes, and I agree. Trust is everything. Trust is so important. And I'm speaking to many companies. I often hear, how do you choose actually your partner well? What should I look out for? Should I go with an Indian CDMO? Should I choose somebody who is next door? And so I would love to hear your take, Abdel. What are the critical questions or the factors we should be looking out for when choosing a CDMO?
Obviously, it's a very important decision. And,
it's almost like marrying somebody. It's a very important decision.
Like marrying somebody. By the way, I was invited last weekend to an Indian marriage, and I can tell it is unbelievable. It's such a big event. And I think once you marry in India, you will not marry again. I think that's why the divorce rate is probably not high. Very nicely orchestrated events, and it really take a lot of time, and it's very nice. I can compare it with that. We are in a business of trust, and it's all about, at the end of the day, how do our customer choose their partners? And there are multiple criteria. I think budget being one essential part of it. Expertise is going to be a second one. And then, of course, track record, having the facility, the people to deliver in time. And then you need also to think about different segment of customer. They are not all the same. All the CDMO are not the same. Also, the customer are different. You have, I would say, two major customer segments, David. The small biotech company, literally a scientist, a professor at university discovered a new molecule and get some funding and want to get in the clinical phase. And the other companies are large, established corporations that have teams in place and even relationship in place. So these are two different segments, and the needs are quite different. So I think small biotech companies are looking for a solid partner that can deliver end-to-end solution and with whom they can work together and in a good manner. So basically for these guys, budget play a big role, but also track record. They want to sell this asset eventually to somebody. So you've got to pick the right partner, in terms of delivery, in terms of quality, and in terms of the way you treat also your people, etc. That plays an important role. Big corporation, they have already established network on partners, and they are actually always on the look for even a better partner for de-risk their supply chain. They might look different way because they have eventually also commercial supply. So they need a larger discussion, a strategic discussion on how can you help us de-risk our pipeline? What value can you create for us as a global player? So these two segments tend to have different value proposition. It's about finding that sweet spot, and a basic client will always decide based on those combination of parameters and then the way you position your value.
And what are pitfalls you've observed? Because I think the cost side is definitely attractive when you're choosing an Indian CDMO, but what are the pitfalls, the things we should avoid doing, or the questions maybe we should ask up front to avoid that?
It's not specific to being an Indian CDMO. I think when you bring two partners together, let's take a small biotech company and you take a CDMO on the other side. So definitely these are two different worlds that are starting to work together. And then you've got a scientist with a brilliant idea, with a molecule that want to be synthesized, and they're looking for speed. They're looking to advance into the clinic as soon as possible. That's what really matters, speed, a reasonable budget, because they always have limited funds. And then you've got on the other side an expert in CMC, in manufacturing, in development. I think when you bring these two organizations together, it's like two expertise, and the dialogue is so important, finding a common ground and get to understand each other. So because when you look at it from CMC, you are considering a lot of stuff that might seem like, why the hell do we need all this? And because you need to comply with certain regulation, because you need to manufacture GMP, you need to have certain analytical method, for example, etc. So that conversation is so key, because sometimes if as a client you want to cut something, that has an implication, that has a certain risk associated to it. So understanding the risk profile, feeling comfortable with the way you develop your timelines and your development project, manufacturing project, that's key. Now, universal to this business, dependent if you are US or European, Swiss or German or Indian or Chinese. I think it's fundamental to have really a good dialogue about the scope. And now, when it comes down to execution, I think that's where you need really to pay attention to cultural nuances. I think some pitfalls might be basically with the way we interact culturally together. There are cultures which are extremely direct, outspoken, extrovert. In average, it's always an average, right? Within each culture, there are, of course, everything. But if you take, I think, a German client and you put it in contact with an Indian client in a culture which is more direct, fact-based, in a culture which is probably more indirect and more things are done in a subtle way, where you need to pay attention to that. Because, for example, in the Indian culture, hierarchy and the client is the king play an important role. And you might hear a yes just because you are giving an order. You need to pay attention to that. You have those conversations in the right way and you pay attention to these cultural nuances and you make sure that you listen really carefully. It's the same if you work with Japanese. You will never hear anything. They will never confront. There's not a confrontation culture. And in India, it's a little bit like that. If you are like boss or you are a client, often you will hear what you want to hear. And you need to pay attention to that you are opening up the dialogue. Don't be direct and absolute. Give the team the chance actually to give you the options so they can commit to it instead of dictating it. Because if they feel the client wants it done in a day, potentially a German CDMO will tell you this is not possible. It's not going to happen in a day. But maybe an Indian will say yes, but do not deliver in that part of that culture. That's a kind, I would say, a potential pitfall that communication will pay attention to.
Yeah, that's a very important point to keep in mind when working with Asia in general. A friend living in Japan once told me, if you hear from a Japanese company, they say you something like, it's challenging, it means it's not possible. And for us European, it may sound, well, we will find a way. But no, for the Japanese, it's clear it's not possible to know exactly. Listen between the lines.
Really listen between the lines. And quite honestly, I've got some feedback already from my people here in India. He said, you manage actually to put us in a safe environment where we can actually say what we think, which is really great because I'm not pushing like top down. This is the way it needs to be done, because I knew it's a very hierarchical structure, which is okay. Hierarchy is not bad because that's the way you get stuff done. But you need, when you are a client or you are in a leadership position, for example, you need to pay attention to that. You let the team come with options. Don't be absolute in what you're saying. Keep room. And I say, look, we don't need to overcommit. We need to feel comfortable and deliver on that, because this is a business of trust. Because once you disappoint a customer, you hit his trust. And then once you get in that untrustful kind of situation, that's not easy to maneuver. They need to feel. And then even if you run to a challenge or you've got a technical issue to resolve, everybody get that. I worked for many big CDMOs, Lonza, Carter, and KBR. Everyone has challenges. There is no project where you don't have challenges. It's normal. But more important is the way you talk about it, the way you are proactive about it. The best is to communicate early to the client, but then come up with a solution. And they feel they're part also of finding that solution. It's more important than hiding a problem for a while and then surprising them at the end with something. And I keep really challenging my people. We need to open up. Communication is key. And I can say it's not more than doable. Indian culture is open to that. And what I'm excited about beyond all of that is how hungry people are for project and to demonstrate their capability. That's excited me most because with that inner drive, you can get great stuff. I think we land on Mars with this. It's just unbelievable, the drive for excellence.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I think you're so spot on, Abdel. It's about communication and communicating early, and that builds trust. And that's how we are able to understand each other and understand each other's challenges. That wraps up part 1 of our conversation with Abdelaziz Toumi. We have explored India's emergence as a biotech powerhouse, the evolving CDMO landscape, and key considerations for successful partnerships. Join us next time for part 2, where we will dive deeper into Lupin's specific capabilities and Abdelaziz's leadership insights. Feeling overwhelmed by biologics development? Schedule a free 20-minute consultation with me. We'll help you identify your critical roadblocks and map your fastest path from molecule to market with a tailored strategy that addresses your unique challenges. Visit the link in the show notes to book your call today. Until next time, this is David Brühlmann helping you do biotech the smart way. All right, smart scientists. That's all for today on the Smart Biotech Scientist Podcast. Thank you for tuning in and joining us on your journey to bioprocess mastery. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. By doing so, we can empower more scientists like you. For additional bioprocessing tips, visit us at smartbiotechscientist.com. Stay tuned for more inspiring biotech insights in our next episode. Until then, let's continue to smarten up biotech.